Today we speak with homeopath Rukmini Kulkarni, who has trained with the International Academy of Classical Homeopathy. We are going to be talking about a topic that's very close to my heart. It's all about poop. Now, for the kiddies listening to this podcast, along with the parents perhaps, I'm sure you're going to love this episode. Who doesn't like some good potty talk? But in all seriousness, it is so incredibly important to have a daily bowel motion. And it's something that with conventional medicine is sometimes not focused on quite as much. So this is really just such a frank discussion of the importance of a daily bowel motion. Now, Rukmini practices via Skype or Zoom and has treated clients from all around the world. And yes, she has a special interest in especially constipation and any issues relating to this. She's also trained with Ton Janssen on homeopathic detox therapy, and she's currently training with Mike Andrews to be able to treat complex cases of autism, especially when there's impaired gut pathology. So prior to studying homeopathy, Rukmini worked for 10 years in the financial sector in India, UK and Hong Kong, and hung up her corporate boots after homeopathy and motherhood beckoned. She currently lives in Taipei in Taiwan with her scientist husband and her 3-year-old daughter. And you can find her on her Facebook page, Homeopathy with Rukmini, or email her at rukmini.homeopathy@gmail.com, or check the show notes. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangouts. Today, we get to chat with the lovely Rukmini Kulkarni, all the way from Taiwan. Welcome, Rukmini.
Hi, and ni hao.
I think you're actually our first guest on the show from Taiwan, so this is very exciting.
Thank you so much. Homeopathy is not very popular yet in Taiwan. There are very few practicing homeopaths here, and we don't have a pharmacy yet here. So, yes, it's a little different.
Well, they're very lucky to have you there, and I'm sure you're going to change things there.
Let's hope so.
Can you tell us, Rukmini, how did you first get introduced to homeopathy?
I am an Indian. So for me, homeopathy is not a new modality. It's one of the most recognized modalities in India. Back when I was a child, I used to have this chronic throat infections and fevers. And my mom decided at one point that enough is enough and she should try another modality to seek healing. And that's when she sought out a homeopathic doctor. And we've used homeopathy since my childhood for all the childhood illnesses that have come up, whether it is chickenpox or measles or throat infections or fevers. All of it was all resolved with homeopathy. And in fact, when my brother was born 6 years after me, he did not get a single antibiotic in his life till date. So that's why I think I was very privileged to be introduced to homeopathy since my childhood. But what happened then was I changed tracks, and my education was in the field of finance, and I kind of forgot about homeopathy for a while. But when I decided to be a mom and come to Taiwan, where homeopathy is not so popular, that's when I started to, research my options about what can be done. How can I bring up my child in a healthy way? So that is when I decided to study homeopathy formally with International Academy of Classical Homeopathy. And that's how the whole process of homeopathy training and studying and working with people began for me.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And homeopathy is like a best friend. It doesn't matter if you haven't spoken in a few years. When you see each other again, you're best friends again. Hey?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, in my case, I would kind of dip my toes in homeopathy on and off because I was introduced to these Materia Medica pictures by David Lilly. And I was so absolutely fascinated with the way he would bring in, Greek mythology and psychology into the whole picture. And I was like, oh, why am I not studying this? All through my education, I was like, why didn't I get introduced to this before? And then when I did, I think it was a big, game changer for me, because then you don't stop learning, you don't stop studying. That's Absolutely. How the process goes on.
He's a great writer. I was actually reading some old similar magazines, which is the homeopathic journal that they put out here in Australia, but it was written by him, and it was on lac caninum and lac lupinum, and it's like, wow, he just really brings the picture alive. So
absolutely,
that was wonderful. Now, Rukmini, you are talking about a topic today that I am so excited about. It's something that does not get spoken about enough, but it is one of the most incredibly important things in our health, and that is poo. So there is this joke in homeopathy where, they'll say, you go to the homeopath with a cut in your finger, and the first question they ask you is, how are your bowel motions? But really, poop is seriously important. And I am constantly shocked by the amount of my clients that come in and see me, and I ask them, what are your bowel motions like? And they say they go once a week. And I'm like, how, that's probably your problem in the first place, is if you are not having a daily bowel motion, we need to fix that, because stuff comes in, stuff needs to go out. And the amount of people that think it's normal to not have a daily bowel motion, but seriously, I can go on and on and on about this, but you are actually the expert on the show. So I'm going to sit back and just ask you, why is this an area of expertise or area of interest for you? Why did you become interested in really helping clients with constipation?
I think the interest starts when we become mothers, when we are having a small baby to care for. And I think no matter what has been our past history with bowel movements, I think when we become mothers, we start to focus on our baby's bowel movements a lot more than we have ever done in our lives. So luckily for me, my baby has never been constipated. She's had regular bowel movements all through her 3 years now. But what interested me was when I was doing my case studies for my coursework, I started to see a lot of clients, one after the other, who had a component of constipation in them. And that led me down this research lane into people are now using Miralax or, these laxatives, which are very commonly prescribed to children.
Movicol is overused.
Yeah, Movicol. Yeah, exactly.
And that's actually petroleum-based, which I didn't even realize.
Yes, it's polyethylene glycol, PEG, and it's indiscriminately prescribed for even children when the bottle says that it should not be given to children less than 17 years. So it's routinely prescribed for infants and small children and babies, and they go on to develop so many problems with the constant use of this. So when I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that there are a lot of myths which are being perpetuated right from this time the baby is an infant. So it is said that if it's an exclusively breastfed baby, it's okay to go a week without the poop. It's okay to have once in 15 days bowel movements because all the breast milk is used up. But I somehow found that it is not true, because when the baby starts to go for a week without poop, it starts to become uncomfortable. There are distress signals that are going out. It does not feed well. It does not sleep well. And yet this myth is perpetuated that it's common, it's normal to have an exclusively breastfed baby not poop. And that is where I thought, we should have an awareness around this. We should bring awareness to parents that it's absolutely necessary for every human being, whatever the age, that they have to poop on a daily basis, because if they are eating something, then it has to go out. And that's how my sort of journey started. And I joined a few Facebook groups. One of them was Parents Against Miralax. And you can hear the horror stories listed there, where children have had such a hard time with pooping. And it really was an absolute shocker for me, because I never faced this problem in my whole life. I didn't face it with my baby. But here there is a world of small children and adults who are facing this on a daily basis.
And the word constipation, that's actually something that I think we use with two different meanings, because some people take the word constipation to mean they might have a bowel motion every day, but it's very dry and hard. And some people take the word constipation to mean that they skip a day.
Yes. So there are various things associated with constipation. You may be going daily, but you have a feeling that you have not voided completely. So there is ineffectual, evacuation. It's one of the major rubrics, even in our repertories, that you don't have the satisfaction of eliminating everything. Then you have no urge at all. So you don't feel like going. The poop kind of continues to sit in the colon and it's not expelled. And then you have actual problems with the stool. It's dry, it's hard, there is pain, there is sometimes blood, there is a lot of gassiness, there is bloating, and a lot of unease, because stool or pooping is a very normal human activity, and it has to happen as easily as you breathe or as easily as you eat. But if that is not happening properly, then there is a problem somewhere. So constipation is a huge, continuum. I would say that it has a whole host of associated issues that come along with it. And it's imperative that people recognize that even if they're going every day and they're still not feeling done with the pooping, then it's a problem that needs to be addressed.
I completely agree. I always joke and say, well, it's not a joke, it's actually serious. A good poop is very underrated. And I think the thing that people don't realize is that the longer that stool is sitting in the colon, then all of those toxins are actually reabsorbed. All those toxins that have been allocated to be evacuated out of the body are then being reabsorbed into the bloodstream. The body's retaking it up. So you're just putting all that extra stress on your liver. You're putting all that extra stress on your body. And I think people don't really think that far. They just think, oh, well, I haven't gone to the toilet today. But it's so essential to have a bowel motion every single day. I cannot stress that enough. Rukmini, maybe you can start off by telling us some factors that can lead to constipation.
Yes. It starts all in, infancy or even prior to that, because what I have noticed with my clients is that if the mother has been having bowel issues in her pregnancy or even in her whole adult life, she does not have the robust gut microbiome to pass on to her children. And, that is where the issue starts. So when I investigate this problem, I always ask how, especially if it's a child, then I ask how the pregnancy has been, whether the mom has had any exposure to any drugs or vaccines in the pregnancy. How was the birth? Was it a vaginal delivery or emergency C-section? Did the baby latch on immediately after birth? Because there is this whole fascinating thing about how nature takes care of us, when the mother is in the 9th month of the gestation, all the microbes, the beneficial gut bacteria, they all start to populate the vaginal canal for her, which is necessary to inoculate the baby with all the beneficial microbes. And what happens is that nature has had a mechanism where it knows that the mother and the child is a dyad. And so whatever environment the mother is going to be in is where the baby will also live and thrive. So it gives the same set of microbes to the baby as it passes through the vaginal canal. But what happens in a medicalized birth is that the baby is handled by, say, the nurses or the doctors and not the mother in the first instance. So it starts to acquire all that bacteria from the sterile hospital environment. And if it's a C-section, then it loses out on this inoculation of the gut microbiome. What also happens with a C-section is that they don't, if the mother is under anesthesia, then the babies don't get colostrum or the first breast milk and is generally fed formula. So all of these start to, add up, and then the baby is not having a robust gut microbiome. Second problem that starts off the constipation is that children are not breastfed enough. So if you're not giving 6 months of exclusively breast milk to the baby, if you introduce formula thinking that your supply is not enough, then that is where the baby starts to, show signs of being constipated. The next stage is where the baby is introduced to solids or cow milk. Thankfully nowadays they wait until 1 year to introduce them to cow milk. But when introduced to solids too quickly, that is something the baby's stomach is not able to digest. And that is why you start to see these problems in the first 6 months or the first 1 year of life. And if it is left untreated, if there are no steps taken to overcome this, then it starts to, it becomes a perpetual chain, which leads to a lot of other chronic issues that start coming up. You see baby eczema, you see rashes, you see cradle cramp, all of it which is associated with the gut, but people just try to wave it off and say it's okay, we will have to treat it topically with steroids or something else. So this is where the initial constipation issues start. And then if the baby has had vaccines, then that damages the gut further. If it has chronic ear infections, which are treated with antibiotics, that is when the whole gut bacteria is wiped out in just one course of antibiotics. And you cannot rebuild it back soon enough. It's not so automatic that you pop a probiotic pill and just repopulate your entire gut. So this is the series of steps that start to create the problem associated with constipation. And then you see other chronic issues start to develop. And the underlying constipation remains untreated.
Yeah. And then, so often babies these days get prophylactic antibiotics in hospitals. So, if they just suspect there might be something wrong, they will just immediately go straight to prophylactic antibiotics before that baby is, hardly even had their first breastfeed. And that just a little bit of gut bacteria that are there then gets wiped out. So it's so tricky. So what are some of the conditions that you see then because of constipation? So you might see certain conditions in the clinic, but the underlying cause is actually constipation, which the client might not think about. So maybe you can give our listeners some ideas, which, some symptoms that they might be having right now that they might not realize is actually due to constipation.
I see skin problems as a major flag for gut healing that is needed. So it could be constipation, it could be a gut dysbiosis factor. So anything that is coming out on the skin is because you're not eliminating enough through the normal pathway, through your stool, through your urine. Then we also see children who are constipated don't sweat enough. So the toxins have nowhere to go and they start to, see skin conditions like eczema or later on psoriasis. Anything that is bothering you on the skin should be looked at as first a digestion issue. We see food intolerances, and they have cropped up so much nowadays that you have babies intolerant to cow milk, to peanuts, to eggs or soy or corn. A part reason for this is the vaccines, because they have certain adjuvants with peanut oil or corn or soy,
egg,
which escape through the mother's through the baby's gut and start to irritate the baby. So we see food intolerances as a big issue. And later on, we also see mental and behavioral issues with use of certain laxative. So those are the things that you should be wary of when you are trying to treat these conditions, these host of conditions. The problem may be constipation in the first place.
And it's such a big one to get on top of pretty quickly, because I have treated some clients who came to see me because the constipation has gone on so long that the bowel has actually stretched. And then those stretch receptors, the child or the adult then doesn't actually recognize those signals because the bowel is so overly stretched. And then, the hemorrhoids that come with that, there can be bleeding, there can be fissures, so many other traumatic things. And before we started recording, talked about little children. And so often they can have a fright, which, can lead to the constipation. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that, because I think some people, when they do potty training, that's actually could be quite a big event in a child's life. So talk to us about how homeopathy, what are some of the problems that you see and how can homeopathy help with that?
Absolutely. What I understand is that when you start to toilet train or potty train a child who's not ready developmentally for this, that means you're putting or creating extra stress on the child. Some parents start to do it very early on and the child is not ready and they start to get frightened after seeing the poop, or the flushing sound of the toilet can be a huge trigger for them. Or if they see the big, empty space of the potty, which can be another traumatic thing for them. So what I suggest is that if the child is not ready, then the parents hold off on the potty training bit and encourage, the child to be unafraid of poop. Make it very normal. Show them that, generally children will follow the parents around to the bathroom. So make it very normal for them that this is how it should be. And, it's very normal to go into the bathroom and poop, and don't make it a big event for them. Recognize if they are sending out distress signals. Another thing that I've observed is that when they are toddlers and they want a control over their environment and they don't have that, so a lot of times they have to listen to their parents or their teachers about when they should get up and what they should do, what clothes they should wear, when they should go out, when they should stop playing. All of this means that they have no control over what is happening around them. So what they in turn start to do is start holding on to their bowel movements as, a recognition that I have an autonomy over my body. So I will not poop just because I have that control. So if this is a trigger, then try to, see and address this as well. With homeopathy, sulfur, in fact, is a great remedy if the child is frightened of poop. And Alan, in fact, notes it in his keynotes that the child will start to hold the poop in because he's had a traumatic episode of pooping in the past. So once that is addressed, if it is indeed a sulfur child, then this fear goes away and they can, start going back to the potty and not hold it in. So there are some great remedies in homeopathy which address this fear or trauma around pooping. And I would like to give an example. A 6-year-old girl came to me with the constipation issues. And since I prescribe classically and, after taking the whole constitution into picture, I realized she's a silica child with, obstinate and having issues with her nails and the offensive perspiration and, of course, the constipation. So I prescribed silica, and after 3 or 4 weeks, the mom came back and said nothing has changed and she's still the same. The poops are still soft. She's, on magnesium or vitamin C, but she still is very much afraid of pooping and she wouldn't go in the school at all. So what this girl was doing was that when she was at school from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., because she was afraid of pooping in school, she would not drink any water in this time. She would not eat anything from the morning, so she would go empty stomach to the school and continue that way until 4 p.m., which is when she came back home and was assured about the conditions of the environment, and then she would eat. So I asked the mom if there is any trauma, that has happened around pooping. And she said, yeah, she used to go regularly in school when they had a potty break. But what happened was once she got locked in the bathroom and she could not come out. And there is this space between the door and the floor, and she had to crawl down from under that and, escape the bathroom. And from that day onwards, she stopped, going to the school toilet. And that's when it was an aha moment for me. And I said, oh, this is an opium case, perhaps, because it's an ailment from fright, and that's also associated with constipation. So I prescribed opium, and then the fear went away, and then she could go to the school. And then, of course, I followed it up again with silica because that was her main constitutional remedy. And she's doing very well now. It's wonderful.
Well, opium is an amazing remedy for constipation. And I've often prescribed that when we see constipation in newborns, when maybe there's been a very traumatic birth, that fright and that shock that's imprinted on the baby's vital force, then they, hold it's like the rectum is almost paralyzed, because that's one of the keynotes of opium. And then you give this baby opium, and maybe the mama dose too, if it was a very traumatic birth for her as well. Then, and then everyone's pooping again. Then we're all happy.
Yes. And if the mother has had anesthesia during birth, and the baby seems very sleepy or heavy lidded, so it's awake but it's heavy lidded, and that's an indication again for opium that you need to consider that for infants who are not pooping well.
Absolutely.
So opium is an amazing remedy that way.
Have you got some other case studies for us?
Oh yes, I would like to share a couple of them. This middle-aged man came to me. He was 40 years old, and his issue was skin rashes. They would be red and hot and itchy all over. And when I asked him more about it, he said it happens mostly after he's had a bath or when he's in bed. So I kind of, did the usual case taking. I realized he's a very theorizing kind of a person, very intellectual. And he loves his sweets. He would eat a whole jar of jam if he was busy working, so love of sweets was there. And then this rashes and a bit of constipation as well. So I prescribed sulfur for him, and he did well on the 30C. The rashes started to go away. He was very regular in his bowel movements. And we went up in potency. And when we reached 1M, he told me that 2 days after the remedy, he had an episode of crying. He cried for an hour, and he did not know why this happened. To this date, he doesn't understand or cannot explain why he had this crying bout. And what would happen is that, he would do well on the 30C or 200C and then relapse after a while. So that's why we went up in 1M. And after this crying bout, all of it stopped, it all sorted out. And then he came up and told me, because this is something patients always do, they don't tell you everything or the whole story at one go. But he told me that he had a mother who was very controlling, and therefore he used to kind of hold back from her. And the constipation issue actually started from that point on, where he had to hold back on his emotions, and he also held back on the stool. And when that emotion was released, that's when the stool started to get released. And once the stool was, regular, and he was no longer constipated, his rashes stopped coming, and he healed wonderfully with sulfur as the only remedy. So this was a very, I would say, an aha moment for me, that, this emotional well-being is so integral to healing, or any physical or any issue that happens on the physical level needs an emotional release and healing as well. So this was one fascinating case that I had. Another was a case of a woman who would go once a week. So she said she came to me for hormonal issues. She was almost menopausal. Her periods were disappearing and she would get the hot flashes. But going once a week was a big flag for me, because she told me that on the day she goes, she would spend the entire day in the bathroom, straining hard, trying to, pass the stool, or sit this way or that on the pot. And it was, when she described the whole episode, it was so clearly traumatic for her as well, that I said, this is something that first needs to be tackled. And I gave her lycopodium, and she started going at least thrice a week first with that. After a while, she developed some psoriasis because she was still not, evacuating completely. And that's when I considered giving her the bowel nosodes. And they are an immense group of remedies that really help reset your bowel flora. So her history was that her father was a pharmacist, and every time she had any sniffle or any small episode, he would pop an antibiotic for her. And she had a long history of antibiotic use. So that's when I decided to give her Morgan Bash. And she did so beautifully after that, because then she started going every day. From going once a week to going every day was a huge change for her. And she started eating well. So you also realize that when people become picky eaters, it's more to do because of their gut issues rather than, a choice issue. It's something that is in the gut that makes them picky eaters. So once that is reset and once that is healed, they start to eat better, they drink more water, and the skin issues starts to clear up. So her psoriasis completely went away after healing her gut.
Amazing. Whenever I hear bowel nosodes, I just get so excited, because I describe them to my clients as homeopathic probiotics. They are not, because they're actually made from stool, but they are just such amazing remedies. And we have various, it's about a dozen or so individual remedies, but then I know that you also use Ton Janssen's homeopathic detox therapy, and he's obviously got the Polybowel Plus nosode, which has got all the homeopathic bowel nosodes in it, plus digestive enzymes, plus candida, which is sometimes really nice if you're not sure exactly which bowel nosode to give a client. Then, we can use the Polybowel Plus.
Yeah. In my practice, when I started prescribing classically, I used to, be very careful about just one remedy at a time and nothing else. But I realized that in the worlds that we live in today, the kind of onslaught that we have on our bodies and minds with, so many factors coming in, one way of prescribing is probably not enough. And you need to detox from certain elements like antibiotics or vaccines or heavy metals at times to actually set the healing in action. So that's when I started to learn more with Ton, and I realized that yes, this is an amazingly different world of prescribing, which gives a better outcome in certain cases where there has been so much damage that has been done and needs to be uncovered. So,
yes. Sometimes that polyantibiotic detox, which we can do through the homeopathic detox therapy, Ton Janssen, it's can be really good as well to help restore the gut flora. And also the general anesthetic detox, that can be a really good one. There's a few different ones that we can do to really help. Do you know what? I never really put too much effort. Sorry, this is kind of on the side, but in case I don't have a chance to talk about this in a later podcast episode, and because it's fresh on my mind, I did an interview with Anna Vivak a while ago, and she talked about ultrasound and how that as a remedy and using that in the detox series can be really helpful. And, when I do a case take, I do ask parents about, ultrasounds and pregnancy, but I never really put too much weight on it. And after that podcast episode, I was like, wow, maybe I should start doing a detox series with ultrasound. And I have just had one of my first feedbacks from clients this week of this incredible emotional release that their child had after the detox, but also they came up in all these skin rashes. And this mum had about 5 or 6 ultrasounds during pregnancy, because there were issues of intrauterine growth retardation, which obviously is the chicken and the egg, because sometimes, ultrasound can lead to intrauterine growth retardation. So then once you have it, then they want to scan you more to keep it on the baby. But so, I thought that was really fascinating. As one of my first ultrasound detoxes, but I was very impressed with the results.
That's amazing. I have also noticed that, the birth practices have changed so much, because there was no ultrasound when I was born. Mm-hmm. And over the years, it would be just 1 or 2 in the whole pregnancy. But now what I found, because I had, I was in Taiwan for a part of my pregnancy, and this here is that you have an ultrasound every month. So that means you get minimum 9 ultrasounds and more if you have, crossed the due date. And that is something I feel that women should kind of take the power back and, realize what kind of birth they want and what kind of beginning they want to give their children. Because I realized early on that Taiwan is probably not the place for me to birth my child, because I wanted someone who has a more holistic approach. So I went back to India and I had a midwife who was amazing, and I was okay. She was okay to use homeopathy at the time of birth, and it all kind of fell in place for me, because she didn't push vaccines on the baby. She was okay with me opting out of it. She was okay with me using homeopathy throughout my pregnancy and my labor. So I feel all of these bits start to count, when you start to look at health overall for children and young infants. So a lot of it is what goes, behind the scenes, or what happens prior to the birth, that is important.
Absolutely. Now, Rukmini, are you still taking on new clients, and how can people get hold of you?
Yes, I am working with people all across, in fact, the world. And people can get in touch with me through my email address. It's rukmini.homeopathy@gmail.com. That is RUKMINI.homeopathy, HOMEOPATHY@gmail.com. I also have a Facebook page where I put out interesting articles, or I'm doing a series, in fact, now on the most commonly used remedies in home. I have a couple of articles if the readers or listeners want to check out. They are on constipation, cell salts for constipation, and the most commonly used homeopathic remedies for constipation.
Wonderful. Well, that leads me into my next question, which is, just to finish off, bit of fun. What are your 3 favorite homeopathic remedies and why? But actually for you, what are your 3 favorite constipation remedies and why?
I will not give you the answer that you're probably looking for, Eugenie, but I will tell you that the major polycrests are a favorite tool that I always use with my clients. So be it Calcarea carb, be it sulfur, be it Nux vomica, be it bryonia, these are all main remedies for constipation. But always when you're dealing with this issue, you have to look at the overall picture. You have to see whether the person fits this kind of the materia medica picture. Because too often, if you just use a constipation remedy like a Nux vomica, it's definite to give you results, but the results are very short-lived. And you will not have the disturbance which is causing is not cast out if you use a temporary measure. So I would definitely try to look at the bigger picture and not just use a constipation remedy. The second set of remedies are, of course, the bash flower, the bash bowel nosodes, because they give you such a big scope, to treat with. So I use them a lot intercurrently if the remedy is not, the indicated remedy is not working, for example. So bash flower, why am I coming back to bash flowers? I'm so sorry
the
about
bell
that.
nosos. No, because the funny thing is obviously that Edward Bach, people say the Bach flowers or batch flowers. The guy who started the batch flowers, he actually was the one that pioneered the bell nosodes. So he first did poos and then he went on to flowers.
Flowers.
So yeah,
I know. And in fact, I also use the bash flowers when there are issues around fears, so aspen and mimulus are great remedies if the child has a fear about going to the toilet, or if she has seen a spider in the toilet and, not going to poop in the toilet after such an episode. So I do use bash flowers in my practice too. But the bowel nosodes are an amazing set of remedies that I like to use with my clients, especially children who've had recurrent ear infections, or they have recurrent bouts of respiratory infections like bronchitis or, lung issues, because it's all, related, the gut and the lungs and the skin, it's all together. So those are two sets of remedies that I love to use. But I'm going to suggest one more remedy to your listener, and that is the remedy called Ambra gricia. This is not a very commonly used remedy for constipation, but I have a very interesting case which I want to narrate. Now, the feature of this remedy is that people who need the remedy are afraid to go to a toilet in presence of others. So this is not something that they tell you immediately, but when you start to investigate, like I did for my 6-year-old client, she would not go to poop in the school or at a friend's place, or, at her grandma's place also. And I tried to investigate, I tried to find out what's the remedy, but somehow nothing came up. And I decided to use Ambra gricia for her. And it was remarkable. The mom came back immediately a week later, and she said, you know what, she's gone to poop in the restaurant, which is never done all this time. So every time we had to go out, we had to schedule everything around her poop times. So this is the first time she's gone to poop in a restaurant, and then she would not hold back even when she was at her grandma's place, because that's where she went after school every day. This girl had a traumatic, incident where, she went to a friend's place and she wanted to poop, but it was a new place for her, and she kind of held it in, and there was a lot of pain in the abdomen, and she was crying, and the mother had to go and pick her up from the play date, only because she was not wanting to use a new bathroom. So this is a wonderful remedy for children who are very shy and who don't want to go to the toilet when other people are present. That is something which...
That's wonderful. It might be a good one as well, if you are in a workplace and you don't want to go into, the toilet, and you don't want to hear people,
Absolutely.
You don't want to poop with people in the cubicle next door.
Yeah.
But that's the remedy that's made from the whale. Hey, I can't remember if it's the whale fat or whale oil or something with the whale.
Yeah, the sperm of the whale, I think. Yes.
And one of the other things that I think one of the keynotes, or one of the, strange, rare things about this remedy is that they almost feel like their poo is part of them. So they almost don't want to actually get rid of the poo, because it's like getting rid of part of them. Yeah. And this is why we can never get bored with homeopathy, because there's so many interesting things to learn. Hey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rukmini, it's been super fun chatting with you today. Thank you so much for talking about this incredibly important topic today. And I really hope more of our clients will really consider their bowel motions. And if they feel it's not up to scratch, get in touch with Rukmini.
Thank you so much, Eugenie, for this opportunity. I feel, as you said, this is not a topic which is widely spoken about. And I feel, especially with children, this is something that needs to be addressed earlier rather than later, because it can crop up as a lot of other issues which are not seemingly related, but they are all kind of dial back to constipation. So for new mothers especially, it's important that this issue be addressed. And so thank you so much. I enjoyed chatting with you. So I really look forward to listening to all your other podcasts also.
Well, it's such a pleasure. And to all our listeners, we wish you very happy pooping. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
The Homeopathy Hangout podcast is produced by Eugenie Kruger Homeopathy. For more information, visit eugeniekruger.com. The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not replace advice from your medical practitioner. Please read our full disclaimer in the show notes. Thank you for listening.